Welcome once again, everybody. This is David Rapkin at Psychedelics Today. This is a vital psychedelic conversation, which means we're talking about important topics and we are bringing in people that are part of our Vital community, Vital being our 12-month training course that starts for cohort 4 in September. One of the vital topics that we're talking about in this episode of our webinar with Rev. Lynda Carré is spirituality. So what I want us to start off by doing is just thinking about the word spirituality. What does it mean to you? Spirituality. What does it mean maybe as a concept? And now what I want us to do is actually, what does spirituality feel like? Not as a concept, but as a feeling, as an experience. And now that we're feeling into that, what is spiritual and what is not spiritual? Feeling into that question. And where does our spirituality as an experience and feeling come from? So with these questions, I just want to say welcome to Lynda. So Lynda is a graduate alumni from our very first ever Vital course, which was a beautiful cohort of people a few years ago. And so we're now in cohort 3 and cohort 4 starts in September. And I wanted to, just ask you, Lynda, when you did a presentation, I think it was 6 months ago. So you did a wonderful webinar with us, just to our Vital students and graduates, about spirituality, end of life care, death and dying, kind of chaplaincy work. How did that feel, kind of presenting to our community again? I know now we're doing it to the whole wide world, but what was that like as a graduate of Vital, presenting to the community of Vital?
It was extremely satisfying, and the the way that people received it and the understanding of the importance of the spiritual aspect. And spirituality is how we make meaning out of our lived experiences. And nothing is more shifting than our psychedelic experiences. We let go of who we are and we can't unsee what we've newly seen. And it's how to make meaning out of those things. Also, I think it's very important to the psychedelic integration process. So for me, it felt like a mission and a mandate, and also just absolutely satisfying to get the response that we had with the people that were in that webinar last time. So I'm glad to be here again.
Yeah, we're coming full circle. I love that you said mission and mandate as well. Um, so this is really important. This is a vital psychedelic conversation, spirituality. And hopefully we just felt into that, where it lives within us. And it's something that we all have as human beings. So this topic today is called Spirituality, an Essential Understanding for Psychedelic Integration. So I just want to tell you a wee bit more about Lynda. So as I said, she is a Vital alumni from our first cohort. She is an ordained interfaith minister and chaplain, now living in California. She's the founder of an organization called Wellspring Passage, and you can find that website, wellspringpassages.com. And there she focuses on psyche spiritual care for people working with aging, illness, and dying as they are journeying through life. So, with the journey that we now have for the next 50 minutes, Lynda, I'd like to hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. One of the things that in most of my clients that I find very interesting is that many people I'm finding are more mature or more aged, I would say, and they're done with external exploration, maybe even done with work, that kind of thing. And it's all about, what's showing up for me now? What is it? What else? There's got to be something else. What more can I understand about my lived experience? I also have a number of clients that go to other countries to do psychedelic experiences. Some of them I would call repeat. And some of them also have experience of spiritual bypassing, which I will talk a little bit about in this. So those kind of things, and it's finally coming to how do we mine the wisdom that comes from the psychedelic experience? And I find that particularly important. Also, I'll talk a little bit about what spirituality is and what it is not. Many people think of spiritual, oh, I'm not spiritual. And I also work in a trauma hospital here in north of San Francisco. It's a 300-bed trauma hospital. One of the advantages that I get working with the doctors and nurses who are always saying, how's your blood pressure? How's this body part? How's that part? I get to come in and I say, how are you coping with this? What practices do you have that give you strength around uncertainty and this feeling of diminishment? And it's really that uncertainty and feeling vulnerable. Many times people feeling vulnerable for the first time in their lives. And so those are the kind of things. It's like, how can we work with what life presents to us? So let's get on with it for a little bit, okay? If you do have any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll try to address those a little bit later. And right now I'm going to attempt to screen share here. Okay, I think we have it. This is what you see. And our focus today is spirituality. Because of our timing and because I want to make sure that we have some time for question and answers, some of the slides I'll go through a little bit more quickly than I'd like, but you can please reach out to me later to ask questions about things. So this is our essential understanding here. We have a few learning objectives. I really, really hope you get it, that after this webinar, you will be able to understand why spiritual well-being is essential to psychedelic integration. And then also have a heightened awareness that conscious and subconscious influences deeply impact these transpersonal experiences. And then perhaps be able to incorporate some basic understanding of influences assessment in your clients or your patients. I use that interchangeably, experiential process. I'm hoping to give you some tools and awareness so that it can impact how you work with your clients and yourself. Some very important basic terms, and these come from the Journal of American Medical Association Psychiatry. And there has been a very important paper recently, and it was the importance of integrating spiritual, existential, religious, and theological components in psychedelic assisted therapies. And you would think that that would be natural, but it isn't. It's not, because it's a complex issue. It's hard to define. It's hard to get, especially clinicians, to wrap their heads around it. But in basic, the depth of research that's going into the importance of spirituality and spiritual care. Spiritual care is healthcare. It is about well-being. It's how you achieve being able to move through uncertainty and change in your life. But these particular terms, spiritual, existential, religious, theological, and ontological, and they call that PAT in psychedelic assisted therapy integration. So spiritual is a concern and relationship with what is seemed sacred by that individual. And David led us through a bit, like what comes up for you? How do you connect? What makes meaning for you? Is there a feeling involved with what is sacred and important to you? Existential, and that is pretty much the whole thing about, I might not even exist. There are questions, motivations, and anxiety, and it has to do with the limits of human existence. And for many people, it's like a deep hole, a void that creates an experience of panic. So that existential aspect of it. Religious. Some people who are spiritual use and have religious beliefs. And that's much more of the cultural, the community that you might be involved with. And there are certain established ways of engaging with the sacred or the spiritual. The theological would be more along the studies of what scriptures, what sort of sources tell us why life exists the way it does. And then, very important for psychedelic integration especially, is the ontological. And that is really the very nature of reality. So these are very, very important terms to understand. So spirituality, let's say spirituality is the aspect of humanity that refers to the ways individuals seek and express meaning and purpose, and the way they experience their connectedness to the moment, to themselves, to others, to nature, and to their significant or sacred. So sometimes people will say spirituality is one thing or another, but this is sort of a common now description of what spirituality is. And it's really about meaning making of new lived experiences. One of the things I think is particularly important is to identify the difference between and the commonalities between spirituality and religion. So spirituality is, how do I feel connected? What is my purpose? Where do I find meaning? How should I live? What is real? And religiosity, on the other hand, is what practices, rites, rituals should I follow? What is right and wrong? What is true and false according to my communal context? And when you put those together, where they overlap, that's that individual experience. What is your belief? Where do you find comfort? What do you reflect on? What are your ethics? And where does that awe, the sense of the awe, the sacred come from? So how individuals find meaning and purpose and how they experience it, it's the individual's belief systems. It may or may not include religion. And it's an individual's perception, integration, and meaning of a lived experience. One of the things I have as an interfaith clinician, as a clinical chaplain, is that it's a matter of identifying what belief systems help to support a person's ability to cope and integrate change and the making of new meaning, and what belief systems might actually be harming them or causing them anxiety or grief or fear. And I find that many times fundamental religions can actually be really harsh on folks. They might have the didactics, they might have the dogma that offers some kind of promise of, say, an afterlife or something that is done, but it also has the promise of the opposite end, of eternal torture and those kind of things. And that also does not deal with the details. It's like, here is life, and then there's this promise of this afterlife in some cases, in some religions, but it doesn't share the steps of how to get there, or what it's like to go through the process of letting go and becoming something new. So those beliefs are something. What are your beliefs? So actually, spirituality really is connection with family, community, nature, culture, animals, beauty, creativity, higher purpose. Personal spiritual habits. It might be your own personal rituals. One of my things when I was a little 8-year-old child was to go to my grandmother's house. I'd hear like temple bells not too far away, and I would pick just the right oleander bush and just have a moment with it, kind of have a personal moment with it, and then I'd put it in a dumpster. It was just, that was my thing. And it was just that moment, that pause, that just filled me with the sense of connection with something that was loving, something that filled me up, something that was a pause. It's also how do we integrate that overall global meeting? Do we have congruent beliefs about what is happening? And I'll talk a little bit later. And then also that life matters. Knowing our purpose and sourcing resilience and the wholeness of the inner healer. Having hope, curiosity, and love. And that's one of the things I mentioned just before we started the recording, is that one of the reasons I became a psychedelic integration therapist through Vital was in being with hundreds and hundreds of people who were dying as a hospice, as my hospice chaplain and end-of-life doula role. I found that people that had any experience of expanded consciousness through mysticism, deep prayer, meditation, breath work, 500 Grateful Dead concerts, had much more of a sense, their curiosity overrode the sense of fear and uncertainty. And that led me to really want to understand more of how to help people in earlier stages of diagnosis of terminal illness and those kind of things, to be able to be open to curiosity. I believe it's even Plato way back when said, why should we be so afraid of death and letting go? It's just something we don't know. We don't know. And there's a great book right now, In My Time of Dying. And it's really extraordinary. Highly recommend it. So we'll go on. One of the things that's very, very important and is very important aspect of the psychedelic experience, because things open up. We have about 12% of conscious awareness, and 88% is subconscious influences. The way I describe it to myself and my experience is that we are all consciousness manifested temporarily in physical form. To be able to function in this life, our consciousness in our brain it's filtered. There's a filter so that we can walk through life, do what we need to do, have our life, do our thing. And yet there are opportunities where that filter opens up and we connect with who we truly are. And then the filter comes back down again. But we cannot not unsee it, but it opens it up in dreams and mystical experiences, psychedelic experiences, that these subconscious influences come up for us. And it's important as integration therapists that we're aware of that for ourselves. This is a brief overview, and this is something we could go on and on about. If you think about it, these are just some of the influences that we have in our lives, our own and our cultural religions and mythology. We are influenced by our ancestors. We have DNA flowing through us through all of these things, not only the DNA, but also our ancestors, people that we revere, that we put on our altar. We also have, our recently supported dead. We have teachers, heroes, all of these things. So we're influenced by people who have lived before that influence. Archetypes, that's a whole wonderful aspect. I think that many times people who get involved in healthcare, for example, and are healers, are wounded healers as an archetype. And then we also have so many gods from different types. And sometimes it's so interesting, even in your psychedelic experience, it may not be your particular tradition god that shows up. But so many, these are all the gods of moving into death. And many times in our psychedelic experience, it's a death to our former self, which gives rise to a birth of a new awareness of a becoming self. These are just a smattering of what can you say, a potpourri of the type of influences that might show up. So think about that. You are an integration therapist. How helpful would it be to have some idea of what might show up for your clients? So this is just another view of this. 10 to 12% of what we're really aware of. And then 88 to 90% of this that we don't know, but it does open up and we are part of all of that. So why does it particularly matter, especially in psychedelic integration? One of the things I want to share with you is something I've developed. It's the model of spiritual distress. So we have some beliefs. What's going to happen? It might be like, oh, I always do everything right. I eat well, da 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 da. I'm a good person, all of that stuff. And then all of a sudden, you're, 43 years old and you have some terminal diagnosis or something that happens. And it's just like, wait, this doesn't happen to me. It happens to other people. So we've got this new situation and you go, oh my gosh, events that are uncontrollable and can damage me. Now, if that works with you and you go, okay, well, yeah, that's true, that happens, then you don't have any distress. You might be disturbed or you're dealing with it, you're accepting it, but there's no distress. But if it is it's something that you just go, this doesn't happen to me, it's never happened, blah, blah, whatever it is, then all of a sudden there is distress. And a result of that is that it requires that you have to make some kind of meaning out of it, how to grapple with it. I had a wonderful man in ICU just last week. He was the only one in ICU in a 24-unit ICU, and he was sitting up. And I said, "You're sitting up? What's going on? Tell me about this." And he said he went through 3 nights of hell and anxiety and everything because he was pushing away. He had just had open heart surgery, huge, tubes everywhere. And he said he finally turned the corner to understand that he wasn't no longer reflecting on what things used to be. It all of a sudden it struck me like, whoa, things have changed. It's not going to be like that again. He turned the corner, and then all of a sudden he was able to find out what was really going on with him now. And he was having this wave of love and gratitude for everybody that was around. And it was just this overwhelming wave of love for himself and everyone else that he had not experienced before. And that was going through this difficult time and coming through with new meanings of what he had gone through, and then would make a new global meaning. So primarily the distress is the gap before an acceptable new meaning has been integrated into an updated global meaning. And it particularly happens when a person is unable to find sources of meaning, hope, and when there's this conflict between beliefs and what has happened in their psychedelic journey. One particularly distress might even be somebody that has a psychedelic journey and experiences themselves as being greater or fuller or more wonderful or interconnected than they have been in their real life. And then they come back, and the challenge is, how do they integrate that into their physical lived experience? So that can also be a source of distress. So spirituality is making meaning of the experiences. And that can alleviate distress and promote what I would call post-traumatic growth. It's that meaning making is so absolutely important. Why it is particularly important in psychedelic integration is because, in addition to all the rather emotional, existential, all the rest of it, there is the ontological shock. So you have this think of, oh my gosh, I thought everything was solid and real and separate. And then all of a sudden, you realize that it is not, and it's all fluid or pixelated or whatever your experience is, the time, space, solidity that you thought that you counted on, gravity, that you thought you could just take that for granted. All of a sudden, it's a new thing. And so there's that aspect that comes along with the psychedelic experience as well. And that can cause a tremendous amount of distress going forward and of despair. And despair is emotional pain. Emotional pain can affect and be the cause of physical pain. And there can be spiritual emergencies related to that. Some signs. I'm going to go through some of these next ones a bit quickly because of our time, but just glance at that. There's signs and symptoms of spiritual despair. For somebody that you're with in their journeys, make it stop. It's too much. Nothing is real. Questions the meaning of life. All kinds of things. Fear of dying or believe that they have died. There are definitely symbols and signs that happen. Some things that happens when you're with somebody is that they will have projected fear and anger and despair. You'll be with them in their journey and you can see the look in their eyes. I'm going not to go through a lot of these, but there are definite things that you can look for in it. You can see them seeing you and they're not seeing you. They're seeing what you represent to them. So how do you de-escalate those kind of things? Just very briefly, it's like basically cower down. It's pretty much be the submissive, calm, non-threatening animal. So de-escalate it. There are also despair, and that might be that flat effect, unwilling to engage, emptiness, questioning the very foundation of their life, expressions of self-harm, no reason for living, those kind of things. And in that situation, and that type of spiritual distress, you want to re-engage. So it's much more of a frontal, it's soft, direct eye contact, and use phrases like, I'm noticing, or I'm wondering, and tell me more, that can invite them, to encourage them to feel somatically, to encourage connection. So spirituality is a vital sign. It is considered one of a patient's vital sign, and it should be routinely screened and assessed. So one of the things that has been very top of mind in a lot of the clinical work that's being done right now, the thing is, there's so much funding and effort in medical model use of psychedelics, particularly for depression, anxiety, PTSD, and those kind of things. And yet there is also the wonder of expanding our understanding of who we are as spiritual beings having a human experience. And that's where I come from. That's my passion. This is the spiritual assessment clinical model. We will not go into this at great detail, but you can see the complexity of what might be influencing somebody, and they call it the CERT influence, which pretty much CERT stands for spiritual, existential, religious, and theological domains in psychedelic assisted therapy. And the influence they identify, cultural, historical fact, impact of the social group, global meaning, attachment, beliefs about the self, determinants, illness, idioms of distress, all of these kind of things. That, so this is currently what is being worked on as a model for spiritual assessment going forward. I made my own personal one when I work with clients, and I use this as part of the intake process. And also identifying, what kind of like the fourth time, how do you cope with things? What kind of behaviors when you're feeling out of control? What techniques do you use to cope with certain ways? And then also some notes for myself. What's their observed emotional state? What do they say about themselves? What might be some coping strategies that they use in the past for different things when they're dealing with uncertainties and difficulties. But I would say these for everyone, these are really the basics when you get down to it. And so when you're doing an assessment, in terms of all the other assessments, like what medication are you on, what sort of support systems do you have, those kind of things, what are your intentions, to ask somebody to describe your sources of hope, strength, comfort, and peace. Describe, do you have a spiritual, personal spirituality practices and rituals? And something you might say, no, but they go, where do you feel you're most like in that zone? And somebody might say, it's when I'm gardening, when I'm with my pets, when I'm doing my artwork, when I'm cycling. It might even be when I'm with my family, with my children. Describe your spiritual community or an organized religion, and how important is that to you? What spiritual, ancestral, or religious influences might arise? And what relationships do you have with those influences? And then also what concerns might you have about? So not only are you getting this information, but you're setting them up for the possibility of those kind of things. And how do you cope with stress or loss of control and more? So that it establishes an awareness for you of what you might be coming alongside with. And also it allows them to share with you so that they know that you know them a little bit better from a more holistic approach. So as spiritual assessment tools can be aids in spiritual care, but they are not spiritual care. And I want to speak a little bit about what spiritual care is. So, and a very important thing is really spiritual bypass. It's an aspect of spiritual care to identify when somebody is spiritual bypassing. And this was a term that was coined by a fellow named John Wellwood in his book, Toward a Psychology of Awaking. And it's spiritual ideas and practices that are used to sidestep really feeling and being with uncomfortable situations. And there are many times people who go to other countries and have wonderful experiences temporarily, and yet they come back to the United States or in their real life, their daily life or whatever, and they've really not sat with and metabolized the experience that they've had, the information that has come up. Some people go, oh, anger is, I don't do anger. Or it's like, I'm just keeping positive. I have seen so many people so anxious by just saying, I have to keep positive. If I even allow myself to entertain any idea that this treatment is not going to work, then somehow I have failed. And that is an aspect of that positivity. It's a tremendous weight and anxiety. And one of the things that I identify people in their level of emotional and spiritual maturity, people who are immature tend to be black and white, yes or no. People who have more maturity around these experiences tend to be more of, oh, and this too. I'm holding this and we're doing this and also this. And it's a full spectrum. And it makes them so that they are much more flexible and able to manage new information. So some people might be fighting. And when they stop fighting whatever it is, then they're struck with, oh no, now I'm a failure. I've given up. I'm letting people down. When the reality of they have new information, they're making a different choice. They have agency all along the way. And spiritual bypassing can be a way that gets in the way of actually making new meaning by feeling and metabolizing that new lived experience. The only way out is through. Sorry. Sorry and grateful, because things do come up in our life that we are required to face and experience. And if we don't, it'll just keep showing up. You'll keep falling through that same manhole every time you walk around the corner until you finally notice it, decide to take a little bit of step around or leap over or what you want to do. So spiritual care, I think, is psychedelic integration care. It's the care of spirituality's well-being. And what's so important is that by bearing witness to the sacred heart of that your client or your patient's inner healer, opening up to opportunities for new understanding, updated integration, and spiritual growth in these situations. It is such a gift and such an honor. Spiritual care basics are pretty much that it's relationship-based care. It's their journey, you are companioning. You are witnessing, and that's the important. We call it active listening or reflective listening, where you are hearing what is being said and what is not being said, and being attuned into the whole energetic of the exchange between that person that you're with and yourself. So you need to be very energetically clean and clear. Be that compassionate presence. Presence is a verb, it is not passive. It's being very attuned and alert and sensitive. Use compassionate communication, be culturally sensitive. Autonomy, their journey, not yours, and trusting the wisdom of their inner healer. Allow the spaciousness of the relationship between you to serve as the wisdom, as the guide, that just in the dynamic of witnessing and sharing has the opportunity to be brought forth out of the shadows, to be seen, to be honored, to be dealt with. Know what's okay and what's not. Avoid inserting your own beliefs, opinions. Do not proselytize. GRACE is a very important acronym, especially if you have a number of clients, and that is, this is from the Upaya Zen Center, Roshi Joan Halifax. I call it a bit of a palate cleanser between patients and clients. It's to take a moment, pause, ground yourself, really feel into the earth, into your body. Remember everything that you have experienced and gone through that brought you to that present moment. Attune to your own self, what's arising in you, and then also the dynamic of the situation that you're going into, just physically where people might be in the room, but also attuning to the energetics that you might be feeling. And then consider what is being required of you. Just tap into that. What are you being drawn to? And that's when you engage. So GRACE, stay within your scope of expertise. Refer, get your team together so that if it's beyond your scope, you refer to your team. Have a teamwork and a circle of caring. So spiritual care, it's so important. With someone witnessing my process, I can hear myself better. What is happening becomes a truly reality beyond my personal experience. Someone sees me, someone hears me. I know myself better. For me, when I'm working with a journeying patient, one of the things that I do through their entire experience is that I am nearby always, and I actually have a very large sketchbook that I use, and I note at certain points if I'm seeing different movements, or write down what they say. I write down the timestamp, what music is being played, and then I use that as my reference, so that when we are having our post-integration sessions, that I can actually, and something comes up, I go, oh, yes, noticing this. Or if there's a lag, I go, and what about this? So it becomes, it's like, and many times it's like a dream. You can't remember all of it, or it bubbles up at certain times, but being able to have this witnessing document that I use, it's very, very helpful in the integration process for me serving my clients. So that model of spiritual growth again. So no longer a model of spiritual distress, because with spiritual care, there actually is then curiosity, acceptance, and openness, and spiritual growth with an updated global meaning. So spiritual care facilitates self-regulation. And this is from Richard Schwartz's work. And that was one of the reasons also that I was very involved with Vital and chose Vital, was because of the caliber of expertise and teachers that Vital was able to assemble for our education, for our training. And Richard Schwartz, especially with the family systems, was absolutely great. And if you want to say, okay, is this person whole and well? That the calm, confident, curiosity, compassion, connectedness. This would be a sense of spiritual well-being that was fully self-regulated. And we trust that that person that you're working with is privileged to have the whole, holotropic, holistic holiness of that inner healer within them that has the wisdom that is unique to them, that they need. And we are simply facilitating, creating the space for that to come forth in awareness for your patient, for your client. And so today, I hope that we're able to describe why it's essential to psychedelic integration, have awareness that conscious and subconscious influences impact these transpersonal experiences. And I hope that you will be able to be aware of including some assessment of someone's spirituality and their spiritual needs in their preparation through their journey and in their integration. And this is me. You can reach out to me at Wellspring Passages. One of the things I'd like to is if you want to have me as part of your team from a spiritual perspective, I invite you to refer people to me. I can also invite you to connect with me for mentoring. That is part of the thing that I offer. And also to book for educational presentations. I do a lot of grand rounds to educate clinicians about the importance of spiritual care in healthcare. And also, I really invite you to apply for the Vital training. And this is not something that I've been asked to say, but of all of there are more available, more trainings, around in different places. But I found the caliber of the education, the cohesiveness of the experience, the cohorts were extraordinary, the in project was great, the experiential aspect was beyond belief. And so I invite you to do that as well. So thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your presence. Like they say in the airlines, I know you have a lot of other ways that you could fly in your day this time. So thank you for being here. Thank you so much. And this is time for
Thank you,
Q&A.
Lynda.
So I'm going to stop share. I hope we have some good time.
You timed that perfectly. Yeah, we've got 15 minutes left. We've got 38 other people here, and I just posted in the chat. If anyone has a question, you're welcome to just drop it into the chat box if you would like us to answer it. If you want to ask Lynda the question yourself, then you just raise your digital hand, like I'm doing now. So Lynda, I wanted to just say thank you. The grace that you have in talking about, grace and spiritual care. It is a sacred topic, but it's also so down to earth and real. Like it's not some convoluted, highfalutin, I think, aspect or topic concept. It's real life. So just while other folks are dropping questions in, I wanted to talk about conceptualizing spirituality as something kind of just almost down to earth and gritty and not so esoteric.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe could you just talk about how do you actually talk about it in as a concept in a way that feels graspable and relatable, and particularly seeing this as a competence for us to learn as practitioners or just as human beings of how to have a conversation with somebody, particularly around illness and death and dying. Because we often think about competence as what are all these theories and models that I have to learn, and these kind of ethical frameworks and guidelines and things I have to sign to be competent. But spiritual competence, I think, that's what we sign up for at birth. That's what we're here to learn about. So how can we one relate to ourselves in this down to earth, really practical, relatable way, and communicate it with others, whether that's a family member or a client or patient?
Well, one of the things is, and it's in the words that you use, it really is relationship-based care of yourself and with others. So it's how do you provide yourself with soothing and comfort and also curiosity, compassion, creativity, those things, those aspects of your being that give you life, that fill your cup, that bring you awe personally, and then being able to be with others and noticing when perhaps they're not, or they're struggling, or they're obsessing, or that. And it's a matter of then helping them to give voice to their concerns, pretty much venting. Let it out. Tell me more. Tell me more. Tell me more. It's almost like the tell me more, the tell me more, and where are you feeling that? Those kind of things. And, that would be more of a practitioner approach, not just a friend or a family approach. But it is being able to witness and give a space for that to come up, because in particularly in culture, just almost cultures, it's about repressing. Everything is okay, things happen so fast, you don't have time to truly feel and metabolize. And until you actually feel rejection, feel loss, feel that, you're going to experience anxiety because it's backgrounding all of the time. But once you sit with it and feel all the feels, that is how you connect with the fullness of who you are, so that you are not fragmented. And that's what brings us back into that holotropic healing, that wholeness. When we are fragmented, we are not whole, we're anxious, we're fearful. So that, I would think that that would be a part of it. Many people say, well, I'm not spirit, I'm not religious. They think the spirituality is religion. That's for the most part. And then when you say, but what fills you? And for most people, I've lived in upstate New York and in Northern California now, and we're fortunate to be living very close to nature. And one of the things that people say, I feel at home, I feel at peace, I feel truly me when I'm in nature. And the reality of it is that nature is a teacher. In nature, nothing is ever lost, nothing is ever wasted, nothing ever truly dies. It's all cycles, and we're all part of that natural cycle of change, creation, destruction, all that good stuff. That's a long answer, but it's pretty much, spirituality is an individual's ability to be connected with something that's larger than their own day-to-day, you know, eat, sleep thing.
Thank you, Lynda. And you mentioned going in and through and kind of inviting space into life. And I think, yeah, spaciousness, the ability to kind of hold space, we talk about in psychedelics as a skill, but particularly within us, I think often what we're doing is helping someone hold space within themselves,
Yes.
their experience, their identity, their history, their family. So it's that spaciousness that perhaps spirituality really helps as an infrastructure or template. Um,
Along that also,
mm,
and that is when somebody's going through something that's particularly challenging, you can also ask them, have you ever experienced anything like this before in your life? And it may be yes or no, but or even anything similar. It's like, how did you handle it then? And with hindsight, would you have handled it differently? And it starts to give people some idea, a sense that they have agency and they can make choices. First you have to have awareness. And with awareness, then you have choice. If you're just out of fear,
mm,
anxiety, you're just kind of whack-a-mole trying to get things down. But once you can go, oh, yes, I did, that did happen. And yes, I did go through that. Or it was a little clunky, da 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 da. And, and many times when people are in the dying process or in the disease process, they have had only experiences maybe one or two times in their life or nothing at all. So it's a whole new thing. And then it's a matter of like, what has your experience been? What do you think about it? How do you feel about it? Where is that? And there's so much of it is just being witnessed in a non-judgmental, open, loving, presence that gives rise to the healing process. And that healing is not necessarily healing of the body, it's a healing of the fragmentation.
Mm. Beautiful. And that fits in really nicely with our work as integration and kind of returning to wholeness. And there's a couple of questions here. I'd love to see if we can get to them. So what you were um, just talking about, it fits in with this question. A client who's experiencing a lot of distress, for example, and they're really having intransigence around considering a spiritual perspective, like they're just so engrossed in that distress of their reality, anger, sadness, depression. How would you work with someone who's actually just, they are in that space right now and they don't want to contemplate anything else that sounds more spiritual or tries to take them, away from their experience that
Well,
might be more physical?
and I need to know a little bit more about it, but one of the things is that you do not want to take them out of it. You not necessarily. You want them to know that they have the ability and the strength to go through it. And then it's a matter of, and what is showing up for you and who are you becoming as you go through it? It really is the hero's journey. You
Mm,
know, somebody knocks at your door, yanks you out. You do not want to go, but you are required to go. You go and you go out to the jungle or the forest or whatever it is, and you've got nothing. You don't even have your cape. You have nothing. And you know nothing. And then it's a matter of what you learn in the process is who you truly are and what matters most. One of the things about depression that I've come to understand is many times depression is anger turned inward. And anger in many cultures is not something that's considered a positive emotion. So it's repressed. Don't do anger, don't give anger voice, that kind of thing. So it goes into depression, a repression of who they are. So one of the things you might be able to talk about is really where is that? Where are you feeling it in your body? What quality is there about this depression? Really get to know that depression. What does that depression have to say to you? Why is it showing up? Why is it, how is it functioning? What are you getting out of it? What are you getting out of being depressed? Is it safer to be depressed than to engage? You know, those kind of things. Also, know that there is a scope as a psychedelic integration therapist. One of the things that I definitely do is I stay within the scope
mhm,
for integration of the material that arises through the psychedelic journeys. When it comes to family things, mental disorders, those kind of things, I refer to psychotherapists or physical therapists or doctors, whatever that is. So just staying within your scope of work, I think is very, very important. But and thinking about somebody that just wants to stay in that depression, often there is a benefit. It could be a familiarity. It could even be an anxiety that if I'm not me with this depression, who am I?
mm.
But I would,
Amazing. I wish we had more time
I
on.
wouldn't yank, I wouldn't yank them out
Yeah,
of it. I'd just go,
yeah,
tell me more. I'm with you. I'm with you.
right.
Let's
So that's the in and
see what it has
through.
to say. Let's see what it has to say.
Yeah. And I love that you're bringing in resilience and kind of a strengths based approach as well. So we've only got time, I think, for one more question. There is a lovely one here that I'd like us to cover. Just before we dive into it, I'll drop into the chat, folks, a bit more information and the website for Vital 4, which is our fourth cohort. So Lynda was in cohort 1 OG. Vital 4 starts September. There's an early bird discount if anyone can apply, be approved, and enroll by July 22nd. You can save $2,000. The course itself opens September 17th. Admissions open till August 23rd. And I'll just pop the link in there. So the question that someone's asking is around ego dissolution and ego death. And
Mhm.
how does that relate to this, what we're talking here around using psychedelics, spirituality? and that kind of spiritual integration perspectives.
It's
Where does that fit in?
absolutely, it's absolutely key.
Yeah.
And, me as being a sacred death doula and hospice clinical chaplain and all of that kind of thing, it really is about how in our lives do we learn to let go of this fabricated identity that we've cultivated to live through our lived experience.
Mm.
And ego death is not necessarily a bad thing because it doesn't go into a void. It's something like, who else are you becoming? Or how are you becoming beyond that? And I know the difficulty of it. There was one client that I had was a very high powered public speaker, multiple businesses, all of those kind of things, and went through some ayahuasca psychedelic things and came and just her stuffing was knocked out. She just felt like she, who is she thinking, blah, 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 all of that kind of stuff. And it was a very humbling experience. She had a sense of that she was special and an entitlement and deserved and all of these kind of things. And what it ultimately did was that it really enriched her as a human to understand and have more empathy for those parts of herself that she was not actually tending to or honoring, the more sensitive, fragile, childlike, all of those kind of things. She was a real powerhouse with that ego, and there was a cost to that. And when she went through that ego death, it was a loss of what was familiar, and yet then it became something that was deeper and more real and more appropriate to where she was in her life then. The ego was something that had been cultivated through her whole family and cultural experience. This is who you are, this is blah, blah, blah. And it just was a rearrangement, a recalibration. And once she went through the this is who I am no longer, but I don't know who I am,
Yeah.
and opening up to compassion and curiosity, she was able to really come through with a tremendous amount more of who she is now. And it is something where it clearly does happen, and but it is an ego death. It is not a death of the self. It is not a death of that inner self that is always whole and strong and creative, interconnected, compassionate, and sacred.
Amen. Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, we've come to the end of our webinar. I wish we had more time, but Lynda, I wanted to say, yeah, thank you for your work. Thank you for the poetry of how you teach and express what you've learned in life. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for the amazing slide deck that you produced. That is beautiful artwork, really powerful. And yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in. We're going to have more Vital Psychedelic Conversations over the next few months by webinar. And then we've also got a series of podcasts as well, where we've brought,
Podcast.
yeah, we
Podcast.
brought
Oh, yes.
our students and teachers onto the podcast. Just there's so many wonderful people in the world, and let's just see the beauty in each other and in ourselves. And yeah, thank you again, Lynda.
Thank you. Stay safe, everyone. Be love.
Thanks, everyone. God bless.